This is the On All Cylinders podcast,
powered by Summit Racing.
Your host for today is Summit Racing's Paul Sokolis, with special guest, Honda performance expert David Cordell with Hybrid Racing.
Here we go.
Yep, you've got another installment of the On All Cylinders podcast coming in. Paul Sokolis in your host seat, and it is fair to say that I am positively delighted for the topic we have on tap today. Being a late Gen Xer and having cut my teeth in the sport compact scene in the mid to late 1990s, import performance is near and dear to my heart, and specifically Honda performance, and that's what we're going to be talking about. And we're really going to start around the year 2000 and move forward, because some of the things folks are doing with these engines, thanks to the aftermarket performance world, is just astonishing. And to help us talk about this is David Cordell. He's co-founder of Hybrid Racing, and he knows an incredible amount of stuff on these engines and the Hondas they're going in. So without any further ado, David, thank you for joining us on the show today.
Thank you, man. Thank you. This is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, we're excited to have you on. This is going to be fun. But before we get into the Honda world, tell us about you. I like to kick off these interviews with a little bit of understanding on how you became a gearhead. So tell us about your path.
Ooh, yeah. No, I mean, look, I think like all of us, it starts with your family. You know, we're in the South, we're in Louisiana, so there's no shortage of muscle cars or things like that. My dad was probably the biggest influence behind all of that, always with Corvettes and Camaros and Bel Airs and, all kinds of old cars always coming through our house. So I think that that's kind of really where it started as a kid, right? And then, I got older and older. None of my friends were kind of in that space. They were all import guys. One thing led to another. You start hanging out with Honda guys. I had a Mustang. That was my very first car, Mustang GT. And when I saw how fast and cool some of these Hondas were, I was like, I got to get out of this tank and I got to get into a Honda. And that's honestly where it started, right there.
Now, you're also one of the founders of Hybrid Racing. So can you kind of give us that origin story?
Yeah, sure. Back in the day, where we're from, we always wanted to do more things with import cars kind of as a hobby. And we started a kind of a local garage, fixing up, tuning cars, installing, bolt-on parts and things like that. And then we really got into doing engine swaps. This was early 2000s. So, right around when the new generation of Honda engines, had come about, we said, man, it would be really cool if we took one of these new engines, put it in one of these older cars. And that's honestly where it started. We did the first swap probably 2003 with a K-Series engine and realized, with the internet age, with all the people in the forums, and this was before YouTube and Instagram and all these things, people literally took all of the things that we did on the forums that we were posting about, and they said, hey, I need this stuff. I need you guys to help me do this. And so we turned it into a business. We started making all of the pieces and parts to make that happen, and the rest is history.
And we love hearing those kinds of stories because, after all, necessity is the mother of all invention, right? Now, we'll dig into the topic of Honda tech and performance in a moment, but let's talk about Honda as a brand because they've got this kind of really interesting dual identities thing going on. What we know Honda to be here in the United States is quite a bit different than what the rest of the world views Honda as. And I think you can kind of get what I'm driving at here, David. So can you talk about that topic for a bit?
Yeah. So I'm not sure how many listeners of the podcast follow or know much about Honda in general. Not many people know, or at least, that aren't involved in the Honda tuning scene, if you will, that, Honda kind of has like a different sort of mojo everywhere else in the world, except for in the United States. Honda was founded on the principle of racing. Like the founder, Honda himself, raced motorcycles and loved machines and engines. And so that really started the Japanese motorsports culture, late 50s, early 60s. I mean, Honda built the very first racetrack in Japan. Like, it was owned by Honda, still owned by Honda today. They have Formula One races this weekend in Japan. So motorsports is a big, big thing in Japan, and they do it for a lot of different reasons, but Honda has always kind of been at the forefront of that. And I think not a lot of people know that. If you go into a Honda dealership in the US, right, and you walk in, you're greeted with hues of blue and white and pictures of the sky and trees and things like that. Well, that's an image that Honda is trying to portray, that Hondas are efficient, they're reliable, they're affordable, they're safe, they're economical. They're all these things that people value. While that's true, I think in Japan, Honda Japan has its own kind of department, or without getting into the weeds of it, but essentially back in the day, there were two different types of Honda dealerships that you could go to. One for those types of small economy cars, and another one for their sporty, fun performance cars. And if you go to Honda's headquarters or their lobby in Tokyo right now, like, what do you walk in? You see the world champion Formula One cars. You see all of their racing trophies. You see the drivers and the helmets and the suits. And you see the historic cars from the 1960s. You see the heritage of motorsports and winning. And that's not really something that Honda brought to the US, right? And so I think that that's kind of one of the reasons why, like, the Honda cars never got a lot of respect in the motorsports world, because, people see them as just normal, everyday little cars. That's not to say that they're not, but at the same time, it's what they mean and why they were designed. I think is something people don't really understand. So Honda's very, very successful in motorsports, almost in every category, from the Dakar Rally to Formula One to the all Japanese touring car championships. I mean, they race in England, they race in Australia. I mean, they're worldwide. I mean, everywhere around the world. If you go to a track day or a motorsports event, like, there's likely a Honda racing car there. And that's by design. That's they do it because they love to do it. I think that sort of thing has trickled into the United States through Acura, right? That was kind of their performance luxury brand. And sometimes, they're not always scoring touchdowns. They fumbled the ball a bunch of times with Acura, in my opinion. But at the end of the day, now you'll see their kind of performance, precision crafted performance lineup, and they're branding Acura Motorsports, and they're bringing Honda Racing Corp into the US with Daytona and all those things. So they're doing it now, right? It hasn't always been the case. And I think that kind of really started when Honda brought the Type R to the US in 2017. So ever since then, you see a renewed interest in, like, hey, we've been racing for 60 years and we win, they're kind of trying to change the narrative now, I think.
You know what? I was kind of thinking the same thing. Like, they're finally starting to bring more of their motorsports heritage over to the United States. And nowhere was that more evident than at the last SEMA show, 2024. I walked through their booth, and man, they had the Honda Indy car. They had the Oracle Red Bull Racing Formula One car. They had the Rolex 24 Acura there. But perhaps more importantly, they brought the Integra Type S HRC prototype. Now, if you don't know what HRC is, David referenced it just a moment ago. It's the Honda Racing Corp. It's like their racing arm, right? So to see that badge on a brand new Honda Acura, call it, was heartwarming to me, being an old Honda motorcycle guy.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, the yellow car. No, I mean, and that's a great example of all of their participation, right, in motorsports and their dedication to it. Because at the end of the day, they want to make things that are fun to drive. Now, a Honda Pilot is not fun to drive in the sense, it's not a sports car, but at the end of the day, they ingrain in that sort of feeling, which, like, oh, the steering feels nice, or like, oh, when the throttle response is nice, or whatever, So they have a philosophy that somebody going to shop for a CRV is never going to know. They're never going to notice. And, if they were touting racing CRVs, they probably would sell fewer of them, right? Because that's not who's buying them.
Well, if my commute up I-75 is any indication, there could very well be a Honda CRV racing class, and I just don't know about it. Maybe they sell them at those special motorsports branded stores in Japan, right? While we're on that subject, what were those called? So in case I'm in Japan ever, I know which stores to shop in.
Yeah, so they don't do it anymore. They had two versions. It was Honda Premo and then Honda Verno. And if you Google images from, Honda dealerships in the 90s, there were essentially two separate types of customers that they would market to. Premo being like the economy cars, like the Civics and the small K cars. Honda Verno was like the Integras and the Honda Legend and, some of the higher end stuff.
And you said Honda helped open one of the first motorsports racetracks in Japan?
Yeah, so I think they opened Suzuka Circuit in 1962-ish, early 60s. And 20 some odd years later, probably late 80s, Honda started the twin ring Motegi, and that's in Motegi, Japan. So they own both racetracks, or they built both racetracks. They did IndyCar races in twin ring in the 90s. They brought NASCAR for the first time ever to Japan in 19 what year was that? I don't know. Or it was I mean, Earnhardt and all those guys, Gordon, I mean, all those guys were there for the race in Motegi, Japan. I can't remember what year it was, but yeah, it happened. They did the kart racing, so like the prior to the IndyCar series, like the kart series, they raced a lot because it's called the twin ring because there's a giant oval speedway, super speedway, and then it's like interlooped with an actual racing track. And so they call it twin ring because there's two separate tracks that mold together. Even today in Motegi, Japan, they have Honda corporate offices. They have their museum. So if you are ever out in that area, they have like a 3-story museum, which is all of their famous racing cars. It's all of their production cars, one of every one they've ever made, all of their motorcycles, their generators. And it's just like the history of the company. A very, very cool place. One of the coolest places I've ever been. So it's definitely cool.
I'm glad you were able to shed some light on that topic because I think maybe perhaps Honda did themselves a disservice by not highlighting their motorsports or performance arms when coming up with their North American marketing plan. But that's just me. Now to the topic of the sport compact market. I alluded to it earlier, but I was kind of in the import tuning scene in the mid to late 1990s. And back then, it was like EK Civic or CRX. Like those were the Hondas to have. That was it. Those were cool. I'm assuming that has evolved considerably since then. So can you tell us about what the Honda performance scene looks like nowadays?
Yeah, it's pretty wild. I mean, obviously, in the last 20, 25 years, there have been some serious advancements in cars and technology. Honda is always innovating. They're always creating things. They're always changing things. And so now, especially with the newer cars, turbocharged, big power cars, really, really heavy focus on track days and things like that. So cars from the 90s were economy cars and, they were affordable. Everybody had them. They were easy to get and kind of turned into like, well, I want to make my cheap economy car fast and fun to drive. Well, now you can buy something off the showroom floor at Honda that's a serious performance car. And that just really wasn't the case even 15 years ago. So I think it's changed quite a bit, honestly.
Now, just to clear my own brain on this, we often think of the sport compact, the import market, as autocross and road course cars. But are these new Hondas showing up at the drag strip?
There's a really, really fine, tight, dedicated kind of community around drag racing and Hondas. There are diehard guys kind of in any industry, right? And then when you think of the older generation cars, 92, 95 Civics, 2000 Civics, Integras, things like that, even older, like the 80s, late 80s cars, the technology has advanced so much that now guys can get all-wheel drive cars. I mean, they've got turbo setups that make 1,000 to 2,000 horsepower. So drag racing is its own market. It's its own thing. It's very, very, very competitive. It's very expensive. So it is a thing. I just think the majority of it's kind of older. It's like older Hondas, not necessarily, the newer stuff.
So how would you describe your typical Honda performance enthusiast today? What do they look like?
When you think of Honda, you think of affordability, right? You think of excitement, you think of fun. And so typically what we see is, a lot of customers will get these cars, do their bolt-ons, have fun, go to track days, go to autocrosses. And truth be told, like that's the majority of where our customers come from, entry-level enthusiasts that really enjoy tinkering and tuning and, they go out and they use it. So yeah, definitely. I think that more of the Honda stuff is kind of geared towards fun track day stuff. If it's, if you're that type of enthusiast.
Gotcha. Now, you mentioned the word bolt-ons back up just a minute ago. And again, in my day, kids, as I'm wagging my finger, bolt-ons meant intake header exhaust. Is that what we're talking about still?
Yeah, I mean, if you talk about K-Series swap cars, there's a number of pieces and parts you have to do just to get the engine in, like with any engine swap, right? So naturally, you have to change the header and the intake, and you've got to retune it, and you've got to do all these things just to make it work. And if you flow through the generations of all the different Civics, I mean, we're at the 11th generation Civic now that's sold today. Kind of each generation has its own formula. This car likes this engine likes that. And for the most part, it's definitely down to more air in, more air out, retuning the computer, just changing the calibration and tune on these cars really, really do a lot. So that's a big deal. And then when you kind of step into like the turbo era cars, big fuel systems, retuning, bigger turbos, the powers, it really jumps up.
I mean, there's a reason the LS crowd likes turbocharging so much, but that is a topic for another day. And speaking of topics, we'll get to the engine swap thing here in a moment. But before we do that, and I feel like I've said this a lot already, but I'll power through another one. Back in my day, the Honda Crown Jewel engine was the B Series. It was tunable, it was reliable, but now that's been surpassed by the K Series, and there's even another generation beyond that. So can you kind of break down some of the nuances between the distinct Honda engine families we're looking at?
Yeah. So, B Series was really the first most popular dual overhead cam Honda VTEC motor that really came to the United States. They've had other iterations available in Japan and other markets and things like that. But in the US, most of the Civics that were sold in the 92 to 2000 range had single overhead cam 1.5, 1.6 liter engines. They're good for some things, but making big power and performance out of the box is not what they're great at, let's be honest. So the B Series engine obviously came in every Integra sold in the US, Civic Si, and things like that. Dual overhead cam engines with the variable cam timing and things like that. High revs, legendary engine. They sound amazing. And I would consider myself a Honda purist as an enthusiast. I think that they're absolutely cars that that engine should stay in. But as technology came about and Honda said, hey, we need to up the ante, they moved to the Honda S2000, right? Which is something that not a whole lot of people talk about. And you get the F Series engine, which is kind of an enhanced version or like a mixed version of a B Series and a K Series. Like the architecture is similar to a K Series, but it doesn't have the full cam timing iVTEC system and things like that. So as the B Series kind of got phased out and the new technology came in, the S2000 kind of paved the way with Honda's, engine development. Obviously, that only got put in the S2000. And, after that, they really turned it into the K Series, which is, there's two versions, a 2 liter and a K24, which is a 2.4 liter. Big changes, obviously, with the cylinder heads. I mean, that's probably got to be the biggest change. If you could point your finger at anything, it's the potential that the cylinder heads have, the camshafts, the iVTEC, so you've got variable cam timing on both cams. Just the potential for that engine is much greater. They changed to electronic ignition or coil unplug. There's no distributor or anything like that. So with that, the advancements in ECU technology and the electronics and just the capability of it really opened the door to explore all of those areas where, B Series engines, like back in the day, if you want to tune, like you're taking the cover off your computer, you're soldering a socket into it, you're hooking it up to a programmer. 20 years ago, that was how you did it. Well, now it's way different with the ECUs, I think alone is one of the biggest deals.
That's interesting the way you describe it. I'm getting a lot of small block Chevy meets the Gen 3, Gen 4 LS family kind of vibes, right?
Yeah, no, it's when you have something good, when you've got a good recipe, and again, the B Series engine, all love there. I love them. They absolutely deserve to be in some cars. But I think the K Series out of the box, to me is a better engine.
All right, so we'll get to the engine swap tech here in just a moment. But before we do, a very simple question. Where can you find these K Series engines? Like, what vehicles did they appear in?
So the best K Series engines come from the Civic Si, right? So pretty much any generation Civic Si, 2006 to 2015, those are all really good engines. The Acura RSX Type S, that gets a 2 liter K Series K20 engine. That's a fantastic motor. The 04 to 05 Acura TSX, that has the 2.4 liter. That's an incredible engine. Those are probably the best motors out, just straight out of the car, put it into something else, you're rocking and rolling. There's K24s in every Honda, essentially sold from, the early, like 2002, 2003 to I mean, even 2017-ish. So they made a lot of them. They're in all the CRVs. They're in the Honda Elements, all the Honda Accords. Obviously some of those came with V6s as well. Acura TSXs. So there's a lot of them out there. And while those engines are not exactly the same as, say, like a Civic Si, the parts are interchangeable, and the potential for those engines to make good power and be really, really great swaps, it's just, some bolt-ons away, right?
Just bolt-ons away. Now that is music to my ears. All right, so these K-Series engines came out. They were wonderful. They were living happily under the hoods of many vehicles. At what point did someone take a step back and say, these are great engine swap candidates? Can you walk us through the evolution of K-Series swaps?
Ooh, okay, that's a good one. The evolution of K-Series swaps. Now, I remember back in the day when we did the first swap, everything was, a discovery, right? Everything you're trialing, you're erroring, you're breaking things, you're trying to figure it out. You're coming up with solutions that you are, you can only use the tools that you have, right? And so back in the day, 20 years ago or so, we're cutting and splicing wires, we're jumping wires together, and we're screwing shifters down to the top of the tunnel, and you're running the air intake straight off the throttle body, and you're taking axles apart and putting the outers and inners together. And, so like go to the parts store and get a radiator hose, get the best one that fits. And you're just trying to come up with a solution to make it work, right? Over the years, we have sort of perfected the formula and the recipe to make most of these swaps 100% bolt in. You don't have to cut anything. You can plug, the wiring plugs in, and there's special radiator solutions now. There's molded hoses, and it's like all the little odds and ends that you don't have to go search for, right? You don't have to look for those types of solutions. We offer them already done, we essentially in packages, right? So anybody with a certain engine and a certain car, like you buy the engine, you get the transmission, buy the package, and you've got everything you need to knock out a car in a few days.
What a delightful gearhead world we live in nowadays, right? Like ever since the whole swap in a box concept exploded a couple decades ago, I just love seeing more and more applications expand. Like whatever engine you want, someone's going to develop a kit that'll help you swap it. But that said, obviously it's going to be different depending on the vehicle, but what is typically the hardest part of one of these jobs? What's the toughest part of a K-Series swap?
The biggest challenges, I think, are probably finding and sourcing transmissions and finding computers, right? I think that those are probably two of the biggest hurdles that most customers will have to overcome. Obviously, they made tons of engines, but they made far fewer transmissions, manual transmissions, right? And so there were only a handful of models throughout Honda's, last 20, 25 years or so that had manual transmissions. And so naturally, if they're harder to find, they're going to be more expensive. And depending on which one you're looking at, they can get pretty expensive. Same thing kind of goes with the wiring, not necessarily the wiring, but the computer. So the ECU, if you wanted to continue to use a factory Honda computer, there is a certain number of computers you can use. There's just a few cars that really work. And by now, they're long gone. They were only made for 3, 4, 5 years. The supply is likely dried up. So it can be challenging, I think, to find the right computer. But, there's options for all that stuff. But yeah, I think those are probably two of the biggest things. If you have an ECU and you have the transmission, you can solve everything else pretty easily.
And that's presumably where you folks come in with hybrid racing. From what I understand, you offer a pretty robust complement of parts that can help even after the swap is done.
Yeah, so our sort of flagship line of product is really in the drivetrain area. We have developed probably 30 some odd different shifters for different cars. We also offer a number of specific shifter cables, right? So traditionally, Hondas are front wheel drive. And so they're unlike the B series, where B series cars have metal linkages, literally like metal poles under the car that change gears. All the K series cars use cables. And we noticed that there was a big lack of support in getting shifter cables, because really your only option is to use a cable set from a factory car, right? And so if you've got an Accord motor or transmission and you want to put that into a Civic, Well, typically the cables are either too long, they're too short, they don't work right, they have other things on them you don't need. So we kind of stepped in and kind of pioneered an entire catalog of shifter cables that offer solutions really that you can mix and match shifters and cars and things like that, and really offer solutions for people. So that I think is a really big market that we've sort of leaned into that really doesn't exist.
That is the heart of the gearhead community in a nutshell, right? We're all about solving problems. And from one Honda fan to another, thank you for doing that stuff because it's tough. A lot of us don't have access to fabrication, to machine tools that can help us build things to confront problems like this. So the fact that you're doing it and supplying it to the community is a service. Anything else like that you make that if people only knew you were putting out there in the world, they'd be like, oh my gosh, this fixes everything. Anything else you want to tell us about?
I mean, look, the swaths have been around for a long time now, right? So, I mean, we're talking 20 some odd years worth of data on the internet. So it's not hard to go around and find the data and to, read the forums and go on Facebook and do all that. It's not difficult. There's tons of people that are willing to give you their opinions. I think our biggest thing is I saw a market that is just confused. I see customers that don't know what to do. They don't have access to the information. They don't know where to look. Maybe they're new to Hondas or they're new to this. So we have an entire service dedicated to helping customers, consulting builds, helping them walk through the process of this is what I want to do. These are my goals. How can hybrid racing help me do that? And that's a service that we offer on our site. So, I mean, it spans the entire catalog of wiring help, electronic ECU help, mechanical stuff like do the mounts fit? Do I need to get this plug or this adapter? So, yeah, I mean, we kind of offer the entire gamut of early Honda Civic engine swaps. I mean, really, that's really what we do.
So if someone's got a Honda in their garage and they want to reach out and contact you to access this brain trust of information, how do they do it? Do you have a website?
It's hybridracing.com. And on the webpage, there's a link where you can click to schedule a consultation service, right? So go there if you have questions, if you're looking to do a swap, if you don't know what parts you need, sign up, schedule a time to talk with one of our techs, and they'll walk you through the entire process.
And I'm assuming from there you can kind of draw them a map of what parts they'll need, and you can recommend parts from your own catalog or parts from other folks' catalogs to help them get the job done?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I was talking with a customer the other day. He had a very typical setup, was having some issues. I pointed him in the direction of where to look and how to fix it. And, it's just one of those things that you're not necessarily trying to, you're not trying to sell people. You're just trying to help them get to their goal. The byproduct of that is as well, we offer things that offer solutions for people. So, we can definitely explain it to you and help you figure that out.
Yeah, and that's fair to say. Our goals align, whether it's hybrid racing, Summit Racing, or any of the brands and manufacturers that Summit Racing carries. The end result is we want to help you get your car on the road. And if that means you have to buy something, you have to buy something. But we all want to see people finish their projects and be successful in what they're doing, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I always tell my guys, like, the best car is the one that's in the driveway, like not the one that's sitting in the shop forever. So
very, very well said. Now, are you able to divulge what the hybrid racing team sees? Have you seen pretty much everything come through your doors? I mean, any wild engine swaps that would raise our eyebrows?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we don't. I don't know. I don't do a whole lot of wild stuff. I like what I like, and we have a very specific formula. And so, if I'm swapping anything, if I'm building anything, it's usually things that I want or like. We typically do kind of high end builds or high end cars, and I say high end. They're still Honda Civics, right? But at the end of the day, very high quality stuff, good parts, very well built, just kind of complete car. So if I'm doing anything crazy, I'm probably have a Civic on a rotisserie, scraping the undercoating off the bottom of it, restoring it, and then investing tons of money into silly things.
Hey, man, it's cool. I know a significant portion of our audience has been there, and I certainly have been there myself, so no worries there. So far, we've been talking kind of about Honda in retrospect and currently as the Honda brand kind of sits today in the performance world. But talk about the future. Talk about the future of Honda performance and import performance in general.
Ooh, yeah, I think so. I think that the K series is going to live on for a long time, and just like the B series has. I mean, look, It's 2025. There are tons of B series guys around. Those engines will always be there. Now they're going to get harder because the parts are going to get harder to find. Very specific things are going to get rare, and rare means they're expensive. And it's already happening kind of in the Honda tuning world now. Old Japanese parts that were discontinued 15 years ago, you'll see the value on that stuff continue to rise. But I think in the tuning space, if I think ahead, I think there's no way around it, but I think there's going to be some sort of electric hybrid related conversions. I mean, I know some of the guys in the Honda industry right now are already experimenting with, electric conversions and electric motors and things like that. I get it. I like the technology. Would I do one? Probably not. But at the same time, I do like the thought of having some sort of hybrid drivetrain, electrically assisted technology. And I think it's just a matter of time. Once those things get into production cars, it's going to trickle down. People are going to take the drivetrains out and they're going to figure a way to make them work. And yeah, I don't know. Maybe that doesn't sing to a lot of diehard Honda enthusiasts, or purists, but I think it's cool. I think any sort of technology that you can adapt into something that's fun to drive, like why not? I'm for it.
That is a refreshing take. I'm glad you shared it with us. Looking at my watch, we've been talking for just a hair over 30-ish minutes now. But before we wrap up, I want to hear about what's new with hybrid racing and what we can expect from you in the coming weeks, months, years.
Yeah, so new things for us. Obviously we spent a lot of time developing some new stuff for the newer generation platforms. The K-Series engines are what they are. The newer generation stuff is getting more popular. They're readily available on the showroom floor. The used market for Type Rs is awesome. Even the new Turbo Civic Si, great cars. So yeah, last couple of years we've spent some time developing some products for those things. Like shifters, drivetrain upgrades. We have a new air intake system. Releasing soon, exhaust systems, things like that. That's kind of where our focus is in. I think for 2025, we got some cool new K-Series parts, throttle bodies, and some other performance-related things that we're going to drop this year as well. So those are coming soon.
Never a dull moment at the hybrid racing shop, right?
Yeah, that's true.
That's always a good dilemma to have. With that, let us bid each other sayonara. It has been a great conversation talking all things Honda performance, specifically with the sport compact and the modern sport compact market with David Cordell, one of the founders of Hybrid Racing. They kind of specialize in K-swaps, but they've got a lot of stuff for the Honda enthusiasts. Go check them out. You can find them at summitracing.com. David Cordell, thank you so much for your time today. It was a great chat.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. And hey, shout out to Summit for putting this together, man. This is awesome. I really like that you guys are, getting involved in the import stuff, more so than you already are. And the fact that we're on here chatting about Hondas, dude, is awesome.
This has been the On All Cylinders podcast.
Powered by Summit Racing.
Check out new episodes coming soon at OnAllCylinders.com.
OnAllCylinders.com.
Thanks for listening.
See you next time.